So maybe this is what they meant when they said, don't let what's going on distract you. Because since the drones and the orbs and everything going on, have you heard about Mars? Has anybody mentioned anything about Mars? Discoveries, plans to go, what's happening? I haven't heard that. Like, the word Mars is almost foreign right now. Nobody's talking about it. So I think that's part of my purpose, is to bring certain things back in the forefront and be like, yo, stay focused. Focus on that too, but also remember this, all right? Keep certain things present in your mind to remind you about, because we'll get so off track, bro. So let me remind you, this video here is scientists, things that they've either discovered, saw, or witnessed, or tried to find on Mars. Let's check it out.
Humans have been obsessed with Mars for quite some time, and NASA is always sending cameras and robots up there to poke their noses in and investigate. And while, for the most part, all they find is sand, there's a lot more that they uncover than you may realize, and some of it is just a little chilling to say the least. Could Martians actually be out there? They may just be. Here are 20 strangest things spotted on Mars. Number 20. The Tangled Object. Now, I want to preface the first entry with some kind of context. I mean, after all, what defines a strange thing on Mars when it's a planet that we don't inhabit, and so we haven't seen potentially a lot of the things that are there? The answer is that because Mars is a desolate and, at present time, non-life featuring planet, there are things that you would expect to see there, like various rocks and rock formations, and then there's things that shouldn't be there because there's nobody there to have made them and placed them there. Such was the case in 2022 when NASA Perseverance rover captured a mysterious and string-like material on the surface of Mars. String may not seem like the most suspicious things to us on Earth, but on Mars, well, it really shouldn't be there. And the fact that it was tangled would imply that someone or something had tangled it up, only to leave it where it was to be found by the rover. So, how did this piece of string or fabric or whatever it was end up in a tangled mess on Mars? Well, the answer is that we put it there. So how does that work? Well, when the Perseverance landed on Mars in 2021, it didn't only arrive. It had to come down from space and land safely, and when it did that, it used a special netting made of material known as Dacron. It's a high-quality and high-durability fabric that allowed the rover to touch down without a lot of issue. However, in the process of landing, the netting that the Dacron was comprised of had apparently shredded and scattered all across the nearby area, an area in which these pictures were apparently taken, and as such, it was the rover itself that was the source of the mysterious object.
I got a question though. Is it possible that we can put life on Mars, that we could figure out a way? I'm trying to figure out how to, I think I just messed up. No, my bad. But is there a possible way that we could put life there? I'm trying to improve the quality of the video. There we go. Because I was sitting down thinking the other day, I was like, you know what? They say there's no life there, but I already have these theories that we're growing life here, possibly, or doing cloning or different things here. What if they tried to do that and send life there through these rovers or different landings that possibly happen? I was wondering about that one day, bro. I had to let y'all in on that thought. I know it's a crazy thought, but I had to let y'all know about it.
While it was a relief to get that answer, it also showed that even landing something like a rover on Mars can be a dangerous thing, and that's information that we need to have if we ever try to put things like people on the red planet. Now it's time for the sweet topic. A scientist finds something on Mars, but no one believes him. Because to be blunt, it is unbelievable. The so-called scientist posted an image on social media claiming it was from Mars, and you can see it appears to show a Romeike Coliseum. We know that Mars is known as the planet of war, so if any planet would have something like this, it would be Mars, but even still, it can't actually be real. The man says that his bosses refused to formally release the image out of fear of public panic about life on Mars. But then again, social media has become a place where anyone can post anything, and it's an absolute cesspool. As always, you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below by using the hashtag #SweetTopic. Number 19. Martian Blueberries. Coming back to reality for a moment, we'll now talk about something that is indeed strange, can somewhat be explained, and yet is still something that has people scratching their heads. This time, the revelation came from the 2004 NASA rover called Opportunity, and its touchdown made waves immediately as the landing was covered in a weird iron-rich rocks that were blue. Hence, they were dubbed Martian Blueberries. So where's the mystery in all of that? Well, how did these rocks get formed and in such numbers? That's what nobody can figure out. You have to remember that everything has an origin point, including the very rocks that you walk past every single day without a single thought. But here on Mars, it's much harder to understand how such concentrated pieces of iron were not only formed, but given that special look. I mean, after all, as you can see, these are rounded rocks, but that doesn't happen naturally. It's something that has to be shaped by nature over time, and that's where the fun bit comes in. These so-called blueberries seem to be the perfect piece of proof that Mars once had an abundance of water, and that was that water that helped form the blueberries. By doing some special research in Utah and Mongolia, of all places, NASA and other scientists are hoping to find out exactly what these blueberries are and how they were formed.
This is really exciting because we've seen the exact same thing on Mars.
And to get a potential map of where the water would have had to be on Mars to make them happen. As we all know, water on Mars was a huge discovery when it was finally confirmed, and now we're just trying to piece together how Mars used to look and what else in today's version was shaped by the waters of the past. Number 18. Martian Pyramids. Not unlike here on Earth, there are many things that, when looked at from above instead of up close, can appear to be something that they're not. Surely enough, in the decades that we've sent things like probes and satellites to the Red Planet, we've gotten back pictures that many have analyzed, scrutinized, and made various conspiracy theories about, because we're human and that's what we do. Back in the 1970s during the Viking missions, one such image came back and wowed everyone due to how, in the perspective in which it was shot, it appeared that there was a pyramid-like structure on Mars. And you can see why they felt that way, as the pyramid in question seemed to be rising out of the ground, have 4 distinct lines that would represent the edges of it, and more. Now obviously this gave rise to a whole lot of things, including possibly that Doctor Who episode, but it needs to be said that it's not a pyramid, just like how similar images of pyramids in Antarctica were proven to not be what people wanted them to be. Instead,
I knew they was gonna correlate it to something like that. And now it's gonna be the speculation of, okay, so were any of the pyramids man-made? Or did they just all naturally form? This is gonna be the theories that come up pretty soon. If we keep hearing more stuff like that or seeing this type of stuff on other planets as we investigate other planets and seeing that, then it's gonna be, the pyramids will become in question. Watch what I'm telling you.
In both worlds, these are just mesas or special land masses that have formed over time to kind of look like a pyramid when they're viewed from above. Perspective in the literal sense is the key, and you'll find out that this was a perspective issue that caused a lot of problems for Mars and everyone studying it. Number 17. Martian Dust Devils. In 2023, the Perseverance rover was doing its typical research when it was able to take a picture of a dust devil. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically a tornado, but it's comprised of only dust and other loose materials, instead of all the other debris that you might find in an Earth tornado. On its own, it's not a strange thing. I mean, after all, while Mars does have a typical atmosphere, we know that it still has typical weather patterns like gusting winds and such. And so, a twister is entirely possible on the planet. The twist is that this dust devil was bigger than any one that you would see on Earth by quite a large margin. Based on how they analyzed the picture, it would have been bigger than the Empire State Building by a factor of 5. And for context, the Empire State Building is just under 400 meters tall. So that meant that this dust devil was about 2,000 meters tall. And for extra context, the average Earth tornado can be 1,500 meters tall. So that is quite a huge twister on Mars, and it's something that everyone needs to be aware of in the future. After all, if we try to colonize the planet and we have to deal with natural disasters like this, it could cause a whole lot of problems.
So my question would be, well, then what planet doesn't have a tornado or a hurricane that we got to worry about? I think we've dealt with that enough on this one, bro. And pardon me, Mother Nature. You know what I mean? You know I'm just playing, right? Because you don't want to disrespect Mother Nature. She has a way of humbling you, but you just can't help but ask that question, though, bro. Like, is there a possibility we can escape some of this stuff? I don't think it's possible.
Plus, and this is the key thing, a dust devil could get even taller than this one that the rover caught due to the unique conditions on Mars, so it could end up being a problem later on. Number 16. Light on Mars. Now obviously we know that there's light on Mars because the sun's rays are able to illuminate the planet in such a way that it allows us to see it. That's not the issue here. The issue is that the Curiosity rover, back in 2019, took some pictures on the planet's surface, and when it did, one of them seemed to show a case of a bright object that could have been caused by the sun's rays. It's interesting because there's no electricity on Mars, and there's no true reflective surfaces that could cause something to suddenly shine bright like this. So what exactly was it that was going on? The answer turned out to be surprisingly simple. Because Mars doesn't have a dense atmosphere to reflect certain parts of the sun's rays and other things from space, there are something called cosmic rays that apparently can come down and strike an object in just the perfect way that it will light up. There's proof of this, as other rovers have seen other kind of so-called Martian lights and caught them on camera. And there's also cases of scattered light known as sun glint that could have caused this issue. Now either way, it's not a sign of alien life, and if nothing else, it's just something that we need to account for if we decide to go and colonize Mars, as cosmic rays can be harmful to astronauts if they're the ones that are being hit by them. Number 15. Metallic meteorite. Remember how I said that Mars doesn't have a dense atmosphere to send certain things away? Well, another byproduct because of that is that it means that Mars is the perfect place to find a meteorite. After all, on Earth, meteorites have a tendency to break up in the atmosphere and thus shatter when they hit the ground. In contrast, they land on Mars pretty intact. This one was found by the Curiosity rover and dubbed the Egg Rock because of its golf ball-like shape. And once examined, it was found to be comprised of iron and nickel, which is a typical kind of meteorite that's found within our system. More than likely, that egg rock was a byproduct of larger asteroids that broke apart and eventually ended up on Mars. The key thing about the egg rock is finding out how long that it was on the red planet. Erosion does happen on Mars, even with things like meteorites, so by studying it and finding out how long it's been there, we can get an estimation of how wind erosion and other elemental factors have affected it. And
not only that, I'm the person of the theory that that's how life gets to a planet that otherwise may have no life. Like meteorites and stuff, I'm of the belief that they carry life on them, man. And when they land, and just like us, and they hit our oceans or they land, this is how we see different forms of life, organisms, and species forming. And if that's the case and they're hitting at a tremendous rate, bro, there may be life on Mars. We just haven't seen it yet. Or it just hasn't grown to the point or found the water source that it needs to start producing. I don't know what other elements it needs, but the fact that you're seeing meteorites hit it, bro, they might be on to something. Maybe that's why they keep going back to Mars and so much. I don't know, maybe.
In addition to that, how it would affect man-made objects once we land there. Number 14. The face of Mars. Now, I teased this one before, but I'll finally get back to talk about it. As I revealed the Pyramid of Mars, when you see things from a certain perspective, you might feel as though you're looking at something familiar when you're actually not. Enter the face of Mars. This was another thing that was discovered by the Viking 1 mission in 1976. Specifically, it was the Cydonia region of the Red Planet, and when this picture was shown around, people were pointing at one rock in particular because it looked like a human face. Given the low-res picture, you can see why they would say that. The object in question has a humanish shape to its so-called face, and it appears to also have eyeballs, a nose, and a mouth. So naturally, someone had to make this literal rock face, right? Well, wrong. In fact, NASA immediately said that this rock face was nothing more than an optical illusion caused by other factors. They would prove this in scientific fashion years later when they sent more probes to Mars and took pictures of that same rock area, and as the pictures got better, it was proven to just be a rock. The face-like elements were just light and shadow that made people think that they were seeing a face when it was just a perfectly shadow-covered rock. Number 13. An ancient lake. Now here's one from early 2024 that could heavily change our view of Mars. I already talked about how it's been proven that water has been found on Mars at one point in time, and how scientists at NASA are beyond trying to figure out where bodies of water were so that they can paint a clear picture of the state of Mars in the past. And surely enough, in January of 2024, the Perseverance rover found the remains of an ancient lake. This particular ancient lake was found inside of a crater via sediments that were collected by the rover, and due to this, we now have a definitive location to begin looking for not only other water samples, but potential samples of life that may have lived in this body of water millions of years ago. For the record, we have not discovered life on Mars, but we may be getting close.
We don't believe that. We don't believe that for one red second. We don't believe that. We believe y'all haven't told us yet. We know y'all wouldn't tell us right off the bat if y'all found life on Mars. First of all, y'all don't want that getting out to other countries that could be leading the space race at the moment. So y'all don't want that to get out. So stop saying that. No. They wouldn't tell us. No.
Closer to it, even if it's only microbial life, which would still be a big deal. The plan now is to try and get below the Martian surface to get even more samples and see what else can possibly be found. We're truly on the verge of something special, hopefully. Number 12. The Door. When the Curiosity rover was doing its thing on Mars, it took a picture that made people believe that someone had made something special there. In this case, it was a door, and it was based on a shape that was compounded by shadows that the rover had glimpsed on its journey. This so-called door was discovered in May of 2022, a small and rectangular opening in a rock formation that was located in the Gale crater. It was taken by the mast camera and quickly went viral, and a lot of people likened it to a doorway that had been carved into the surface. The straight edges and shadowed interior fueled a lot of various theories, anything ranging from an ancient Martian civilization to an entrance of a secret government base. However, it did come with an explanation. It's turned out to be a natural geological formation that resulted in the fracturing of rocks. Mars is a planet with a long history of seismic activity and extreme environmental conditions, and it's said that over time, these can cause rocks to crack and break in ways that may end up resembling man-made structures to the human eye. In this case, the so-called doorway is likely just a small fracture in a large rock, with an illusion of a passage being a trick of light and perspective. It's said that the structure was in fact 30 centimeters tall and 40 centimeters wide, which is not very big at all. Number 11. Spikes. This is one that is not an illusion, but something strange that cannot be fully explained. In May of 2022, the Curiosity rover was once again at the Gale crater and took some pictures of some weird rock formations that seemed to be sprouting out of the ground like spikes. Even the SETI Institute could not help but post about it online and note that it was a cool rock. It is that indeed, but what exactly is it that we're looking at?
It reminds me of that red lake. For the life of me, I can't think of the name of it right now, but when the animals there drink the water of it, it kind of turns them to stone. That's what that makes me think about. Could have possibly they had a similar lake here, and then that may be what you're seeing is something that it turned to stone? I don't know.
Are we seeing one of the weirdest rock formations ever? Well, technically yes, but not in the way that you may be expecting. This isn't some kind of unique Martian rock that can only grow on Mars. Instead, it's believed that these spikes are merely the leftovers of a larger rock structure that was slowly eroded over time. These may have been the fillings of cracked rock that outlasted everything else around them. Either way, it is pretty cool looking in the end. Number 10. South Pole shapes. Now it's time for another segment of weird shapes found on Mars, where in this one, or said in this case, it came from the Martian South Pole back in 2020. As you can see, you can have a look at what seems to be an angel, a devil, and a rather big heart appearing out of seemingly nowhere, which is kind of disconcerting. The good news is that it's really easy to explain, as since this is the South Pole, it's thawed out ice. Plus, there's special dust and craters within that area that help with creating the shapes that you're seeing here, and one of those shapes, the now named Angel's Head, was apparently created with the help of a meteor collision. It just goes to show you that anything can be formed when the right conditions are met in the right place. Number 9. Mr. Peanut. Now, as I just said, when the right conditions are met, anything can be found on Mars, and that also includes the iconic Mr. Peanut. To be fair, this isn't an exact match to Mr. Peanut, and the angel and heart shapes from before were much more realistic, but the intent is still there, and it's still striking that a look-alike can be found on Mars. But this also speaks to a greater pattern in humanity. We have a tendency to look at things and say, "Oh, that looks like that." And then we put that image into people's minds, and so when they see the same thing, they go, "Yeah, it really does." And while it can be harmless, like with Mr. Peanut, or even seeing shapes in clouds, we do need to be careful, or else we may have the door or the face of Mars scenario, where people begin thinking that more's going on than what actually is. Number 8. The belly pan. And here's one such thing that would make people look at it and say, well, there's your proof that something's going on Mars, when it's actually another thing that can be detailed very easily. Because if you're to have a look at this metal object, you might find someone who would scream aliens and not ask for the greater context. But the context is that this is the belly pan of the Perseverance rover. Now, it was initially attached to the rover to help protect a sampling system that the device had to help take materials from Mars and store them. And when it was time to examine it via special tools and cameras, they then took the belly pan off and they left it on the surface of Mars. Number 7. The Happy Face Crater. Now, I will admit this one does look both strange and convenient, but it's just another case of looking at something from above and seeing what you want to see. Ironically, this was yet another face found by the Viking 1 orbiter that went to Mars in the 1970s. And yes, this full-on crater has plenty of shapes in it to make it look like the Happy Face Crater that it eventually was named by people. Now, if you get closer to the crater, you're going to see various outcroppings and shapes that led to this face being made, but it's really nothing more significant than that. Again, we see what we want to see, and if we didn't get this legendary picture from this angle, we may not have seen it as a happy face at all. Number 6. Donut Rock. Now, to be clear, this is a very real rock that was actually found by the Perseverance rover in 2023, and it does indeed look like a donut, which is why it's called that. The question that everyone asks, though, is how did a rock get to be that shape? Now, you may go thinking, based on past entries, that this is yet another case of erosion, but scientists have a completely different opinion when it comes to this particular rock. Specifically, they feel that this could have been a meteorite that had impacted the Mars surface and then ended up being this donut-like shape. To that end, the fragments of the rock around the donut are the other chunks of the meteorite itself, given that Mars is very open to meteor strikes, which, as we have clearly mentioned, and sometimes rocks break apart in unpredictable ways. Number 5. Martian.
I wonder, is that going to be a threat to us colonizing Mars? Like having people live there with the threat of being hit or a meteor destroying like some type of facility we've designed for us to live in. Because right now there's still the oxygen problem. So in order for us to have air, we're going to have these, air facilities. We're going to have the facilities probably living in domes or something like that in the beginning. And I wonder, are they planning for that type of situation? A meteor coming down, hitting your dome, cracking it, opening it up. Now you have this huge air deficiency and issue. What are you going to do then? So these are the things that I hope that they're taking into consideration at the moment.
Morse code. Now, in 2016, the Reconnaissance Orbiter went to Mars to have a look at a specific area, and in the process, it created yet another Martian myth. In this case, the orbiter was sent to look at some very special dunes on Mars, but when the picture of the dunes were taken, the shape of them seemed so complex that people thought that it was actually Morse code. Now, to be fair, you can get why they would think that, as the dots and dashes are clear in the dune shape, but that's not exactly what's happening here. In fact, it was just simply the case of the dunes being interrupted during their formation, and thus you see the dots from above instead of fully formed lines. Number 4. A thigh bone. Now it's time to get weird once again, where this time it would be the Curiosity rover that found something strange back in 2014. In this case, they found what many people referred to as a thigh bone, and you can see why they would say that based on the strength of the entity that we have here. Naturally, once the picture was circulated, there were cries of aliens and people who said that it was proof that someone was on Mars long before us. But here's the thing. They're all wrong, because again, it was just the case of a rock being eroded in such a way that it resembled something that we're familiar with. Or was it? That's why we have to be careful with things like this. Just because it looks like something doesn't mean that it is something. But then again, we've never put a human on that planet to really confirm it, have we? Number 3. Olympus Mons. Cutting right to the chase with the next one, the Olympus Mons isn't only a special formation on Mars, it's the biggest volcano in the entire solar system. Would you like some context? Well, the volcano is actually bigger than Mount Everest in terms of its height, and when you look at the overall width of the superformation, it's actually about the size of France, and that makes for a really large volcano. Scientists are naturally fascinated by the thing, especially since it's one of about a dozen such volcanoes on Mars, and all of them are massively bigger than the ones that we have on Earth. NASA's trying...
Check, please. That concludes me ever. Go. I don't like dealing with the volcanoes that we have here. You're talking about the ones there or bigger and could potentially be more... No. Nah, check. I'll just excuse myself, man. Maybe they'll have some way for us to communicate with the ones who are over there on Mars, man. Get some cell towers over there. We can communicate, see how y'all doing over there, bro. I can't do the big old volcanoes, though, no.
Trying to find out not only how these supervolcanoes are formed, but whether they're still active, and what would happen if one of them suddenly erupted and more. It kind of makes you wonder why we're so eager to live on Mars when all of these chaotic and destructive things would be our next door neighbors. Number 2. Valles Marineris. Now, if you like that real superformation and you want to see another, well, I have the Valles Marineris, which has been dubbed the Grand Canyon of Mars. It's actually a system of such canyons that span over 4,000 kilometers, and they can get as deep as 10 kilometers at some points, which for the record is much larger than the actual Grand Canyon in the United States. Now naturally, like with the volcano that I just mentioned, NASA and other groups are trying to find out exactly about these massive formations and how they formed. Some think that it was purely because of water, while others are very convinced it was because of some kind of volcanic influence. Number 1. The Canals of Mars. One last trick of the mind for today, where we see the canals of Mars. The twist here is that, unlike everything else, this is not a recent debate. It's actually one that's much older. An Italian astronomer once claimed in 1877 that there were interesting channels on Mars that could be seen from his devices. And when people spread the word about it, well, it was mistranslated from channels into canals. The real twist is that not only did people believe there may be canals on Mars, but after seeing further drawings of them, they believe that they had actually been constructed by an alien civilization in the past. But once technology advanced just a little bit, and then they looked back at where these so-called canals were, that's when they found absolutely nothing. It was simply an optical illusion that had been created by the planet itself. Well, that's about all for today from the realms of Mars and the various strange things that have been seen and found there as we've studied them. What do you think about all these things that have been discovered on the Red Planet? And what do you feel is the strangest that's been discovered so far? And perhaps you really know the truth, and that it's all been done by aliens.